What's going on, everyone? This is Brian Turner here with another episode of the No Stress Midwest podcast. We are in season 6 right now. I know the background's a little different than what my normal one is. I'm on travel, but I had to make sure that I got this call in because I'm really excited about our guest for this season. For those that are maybe just tuning in, season 6 is our front office and business side of the game. We are so lucky to be joined by Yael Averbuch-West now. I didn't know you before the West, so I wanted to make sure I added that in, who is the GM of New York, New Jersey, Gotham. So how's it going, Yael? How are you doing?
Good, good. And as I texted you, I'm laughing that I'm on a podcast that has no stress in it because I think that's a very different. Maybe for this period of time, I'll have no stress, but my life has quite a lot going on. So no, happy to join you.
Yeah, well, and I know we were talking before we, started recording. Yael and I met when she was a player with FCKC back in like what 2016, 2015, 2017, something along those lines. And her and I met. I think she was staying with Lowe at the time, or really close with Lowe. This was before Lowe and Roger, who are now like KC's power soccer couple, when they like were just meeting. So it's kind of cool to know them kind of then. But Yael and I met during that time. Once FCKC moved, we kind of not really fell out of touch, but haven't stayed in touch as much. But when I was doing this season, she was like one of the top three, and she wasn't three on who I wanted to have on. So Yael, I want to first just kind of get this going. You just won an NWSL championship, right? Or your club did. What was that feeling like? Kind of like at the beginning of the season, did was there buzz going around like, hey, this is going to be a good year for us? Hey, we're feeling confident. Kind of explain that, that journey and to where you are now with that.
Yeah, no, it definitely was not. We were not coming from that feeling. The
Okay.
year prior, which was my first full year as a general manager, our team finished last. We set some of the records you don't want to set, like in terms of how many losses we had in a row and things like that. It was just a
Yeah.
really tough year.
Yeah.
So it did though give us the opportunity. Sometimes when things are get to a point where they're not going well enough, you have to really stop and revisit everything rather than trying to piece it together and make little
Hmm.
improvements. We were like, no, we need to pause. We need a real strategy as to how we're going to turn this around. So going into this season this year, I had made a number of decisions with the support of some really excellent people I work with, but made a number of really stressful decisions, quite honestly, as
Yeah.
to how I thought we were going to be better. But it's football. You never know. You can bring in
All
players and they
theory.
get injured
Yep.
and it goes wrong and all these things. So I
Yep.
had these theories on what I thought was most important for us to do and how we should prioritize changing and which players I thought we should bring in. And it's interesting in looking back at the year. I think we would have succeeded without winning the championship because many of the decisions that we made, I think, panned out for the best, which was
Right.
quite unusual in the sense of course, I hope I make good decisions, but really we had a little bit of luck going our way, or however you want to view it as well, to where a lot of things we did ended up being the right decision, and we needed certain players who we were unsure if it was the right choice and things like that. So I felt good about it, and when we made playoffs, that was our goal, was to make playoffs this year.
Yeah.
So I feel like we had succeeded because we set the foundation for who we want to be in the future. So certainly we knew we could win the championship. I mean, I think every team has to believe
For
that going
sure.
in.
For
And I
sure.
think you have
For
the
sure.
pieces, and we knew our pieces were fitting together well, and we were happy with our coaching staff and all these things, but definitely was an added bonus to actually win it. And I think to a really nice reward, because for everybody involved in a professional season, it's stressful. You have the ups and
Yeah.
downs, regardless of how it's going. So to end on that note kind of just makes all those things feel a little more worth it, I think, and makes
For
going
sure.
into next year feel even that much more exciting. But definitely was not expecting that would happen. I would say. I think that's
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a lie if I said I thought that was going to be the result.
Right. No, no, for sure. And I mean, you touched on a good point. I think with every season, you always have to go in with that optimism, whether it's blind or whether it's not. Like, hey, this is going to be a good year. Because if you don't, I mean, you usually don't have a good season if you don't go into like if you go into a thing, you're going to have a bad one. That's like not how that works. You could have a bad season going into it with like the most optimism whatsoever, but you don't have those good seasons going into it negatively. That's usually like just not how life works.
Yeah, and I think it's true, like especially in NWSL, but I think all top level sports is you have to do every single thing right and to the best of your ability to even give yourself the chance to
Yep.
win. And
Yep.
quite often you don't. Like quite
Yep.
often things go wrong and like the ball bounces the wrong way, you get a bad call, like that all is totally normal. So I think that's my expectation is knowing what I felt like as a player and now in the soccer world outside of players, you can do every single thing right and still it goes wrong, but you definitely will not have it go right unless you do all that. So to your
Yep.
point, like you have to have all the pieces put in place, do all the work and believe you can do it to even give yourself a chance. And then it's still, 50%
Could not
of the
going. Yep.
time.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Could
yeah.
still not go your way. So okay, you're in your GM role right now. You said you've just kind of completed your second full season. For the people that don't know, Yael was quite the baller as a player. You've picked up a lot of accolades. You've played for the youth national team at every level. You went on to play at Carolina, Tar Heel under Anson Dorrance. What do you think, or how do you think your playing experience has kind of prepared you or helped you for your now current role as a GM? Do you feel you can relate to the players more? Do you feel like, hey, you're now in the business side, but you know the technical side as well? Or do you just try to get rid of that and just be GM?
No, it's really interesting to think about. And I've thought about this a lot is like what things have served me well, what things do I need to kind of discard a certain way of thinking. And so I have a lot of thoughts on this, but to kind of summarize, I guess, one is I think my playing career, and I think this is true for anyone who plays the game at a high level or strives to, is that it's really, you can replicate that experience in a lot of different fields, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so for me, I've done a few things following my first career and my first love, which was as a player, that all really use a very similar skill set because I'm kind of I'm a builder. Like I like to have a vision and then I'm okay to do the daily grind and not feel the results for a long period of time. And I think if you really want to do something good and exciting and worthwhile, you have to be okay with one, understanding what the day to day is
Yeah.
to achieve the big vision. Because the big vision you have, if it's to be a professional player, the best player in the world, or if it's to be some like start your own business and have it be successful, that is days and weeks and months and years in the future. And your day to day is not going to reflect that or feel like that quite often. And so I think in that sense, I was used to that as a player. Like I was in there for the grind. I had the disappointments. I had to build my own confidence. I had to remind myself of my vision every day and understand what to do to bring myself a little bit closer, but to be
Right.
okay to go years and years and you just keep doing that same day kind of. So I think in that sense and everything else I've done since, I feel very prepared to go on that journey. And I find the value in that. I do think from my perspective as a player, I have a deep understanding of what I would have wanted as a player, but
Yeah.
actually I've realized that some things I misunderstood what I thought I wanted, which has been really interesting in this role. So like I'll give one
Yeah. I'll
example of
say, give an
how
example of
yeah.
that, please.
So there's one example where I think I was on point and one example where I think I was off base, and both have happened. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as aware as possible. So one thing is in looking at last year, we were a blank slate at the end of last year. We were in last place. We didn't have, our organization wasn't great. We didn't have good support for the players. Like pretty much across the board, we weren't doing well. We were not
Mm-hmm.
successful. So it's like, well, what do you do first? I mean, you
Yeah.
have
Where do you
Kansas City
start?
Current is building a training facility and these teams are doing this. And it's like very daunting because where are we? Like we have
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
So my theory was, and this came from a player that I think was correct, is that the most sacred thing to the players is what goes on the field. And
Mm-hmm.
that all of the rest of it you can justify and you can be more patient on if you truly believe in the coach you're playing for and you feel like you are being set up for success as a player. Even if it doesn't go your way, if you feel like you're getting the proper respect level of instruction that is worth the years of your life you've put in to get to that point,
Right.
the rest of it can kind of wait, so to speak, although you shouldn't have to wait on any of it. So we really prioritize bringing the best head coach, and not just head coach, but coaching staff to
Yeah.
provide the best experience for the players. And I think that was the correct priority. Like that was to put everything into that first, and then
Yeah.
the other pieces,
Then
we'll
let it
get to
grow. Yeah.
do
Let
so
it grow
much at a
from there.
time.
Yeah.
So that part I feel like I knew that we heard it from the players, but I felt it on like on a personal level because I had been in the situation where, when I played in Kansas City, I played for Vlatko and nothing else mattered because I was happy when I left the field every day. I
Yeah.
had fun. I felt respected. He's smart. He's a great coach. So I when I left, I didn't care what apartment I lived. Almost didn't care about
Right.
anything else. I enjoyed the core element of why I was in Kansas City. Um,
And that's
and
important to leave the field, not to break you up, but to leave the field every day happy is something that I don't think we put enough emphasis on,
yeah,
and I think that's one of Vlatko's many talents, but just wanted to throw that little tidbit in, let you can get
yeah,
back.
no, but it's so true. It's so true that what you pointed out is like for players, and it's not even always happy, but to feel fulfilled or
But
like
yeah, yes,
that it was right, the
I
right
got
and
better.
fair environment, and it's competitive in the right way, and like that piece is
Yeah.
so sacred to a footballer. And so for me, like that's what we hold sacred here. And I think in
Hmm.
that sense, my playing experience prepared me to understand that not just in words, but like to have lived it and to understand the true depth of like how impactful that is.
Yeah.
Um, the part that I think one thing, and there are many that I think I had kind of wrong that I've realized is I also had this experience. It was very, I'm laughing because the title of the podcast is No Stress, but like I'm a very high stress person naturally.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of pressure as a player, and my life as a player was very stressful. I wanted to make the national team, and quite often I wasn't. I had to move from club to club. I never quite had the role I wanted. And I found that the stress of the environment really took a big toll on me. So I was thinking to myself in this role, let's lower the stress of the environment. Let's
Hmm.
see if we can give players more assurance that they won't be traded and they know they have a home here and we're nicer and it's like a softer environment,
Yeah.
and that will help players want to be here and perform better. I actually think that's not true. Like I think there is a natural and good stress that
Hmm.
comes along with winning. It
Yep.
has to be right, and it has to be coupled with the respect and fairness in a certain way and honesty. I think that's a huge piece.
Yeah.
But we have a very high stress environment this year. And last year we did not. I tried to soften it. We were really nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It does
Yeah.
not work at the professional level. There's an amount of stress that has to be present in the environment that's beyond my comfort zone. As a player,
Hmm.
it's beyond my comfort zone. It's beyond my comfort zone as a GM. People sometimes are very unhappy. People get really angry. It's things I'm not comfortable with as a person. I don't like it.
Right.
To be successful, I really think it's necessary. And so that was something that I realized like I was off base on because of my own personal bias based on what I liked or didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had a number of things on both sides of those. Those are two examples, like big examples, but there've been examples along the way, I think, of things where I'm like, oh, I know this. I know
Yeah.
this. And then there are things I thought I knew, and I'm like, uh-oh, I had a bias because of my experience as a
That's
player, and I'm not right. So there will be more that come up, but those were two really big ones.
so. Well, I think those are two good points, and I mean everything, and especially as a coach, it's a lot, and as a player as well, it's about reflection, right? You go through an experience, and then you look back. How did it go? Could I have done this different? Could I have done this different? Right? We all have those moments where you're having an argument or whatever, and then 30 minutes later you get home and you think of something better to say, right? That you could have said. Um, and I think you brought up two good points where you're able to reflect and say, no, my playing experience did prepare me for this, and I can relate to the players here. Versus, okay, this is a business still, and it's not a personal thing. This is a business side. And especially with players, competitiveness like that is stressful, right? When you're in competition, that is supposed to be a stressful environment because that's what's going to, in my opinion, make you or break you, right? When the game's on the line and it's the 87th minute and you need a goal, right? Like those you can't kind of replicate it. Only thing you can do is know, okay, I've been in a high intensity situation before. I've been stressed. I know to either keep my head. I know to do this. I know, so I think you brought up a good point. There's a level of, good stress, if you even want to say that, but to be a competitor and to compete and to perform at the highest level, it can't be mellow and I'm just kind of going through the motions every day. That's a very difficult, I think, and that's just a very difficult environment to succeed in.
Yeah, it's really true. And it's like it's unpleasant. It's really not it is really difficult to be good. It's unpleasant at times. There's a lot of disappointment and risk that comes along with it. And I think these are things that we accept if you want to be part of a high performance
Yeah.
environment. You accept that because the reward on the other end is so good and so fulfilling. And um, I think like I lived it as a player, but I didn't like it, obviously. No one
Yeah,
really
right.
liked that part. So I tried to eliminate what I didn't like, but it's truly necessary.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's just one of those things where as you not only get older, and I'm not saying, oh, little Yael is maturing, all this, not like that, but just as you grow and you're now looking at the game through a different lens, you see things differently, right? Just like when I started coaching, well, I remember like substituting, like subs. I like, man, I'm expecting my players to just play a full game, and I'm like, oh no, they're tired. I got to make subs on the fly. Now I got to start thinking, okay, I'm not just looking at the ball and the play. I'm looking at every player. How are they? Are they able to run up and down? Are they leaning over on their knees? Are they gassed? Are they ready? And it's just something simple like that where it's like you don't think about that as a player because I'm not looking at my forward saying, hey, are they, good or not? That's what the coach is doing.
Yeah, it's so true. The experience as a player is so it's self-centered, which is like not in a bad sense of the word, but that's your job is to
Yep.
focus on yourself and your
Yep.
performance. I even feel that way. One thing I've realized, this is a little off subject, but I think it would be interesting for people to hear. One thing I've really realized from this role is how often players have the wrong response in the most important moment. So one thing I've
Mm,
seen so many times that I wish I knew as a player, but I never would have believed it, is literally what will have happen is a player's a little like a coach makes a decision that kind of takes the player's confidence a little. They don't start
right.
a game, they don't dress for game, something one
Yeah.
decision. And then the player starts to spiral. They try to hold it together. They start to spiral. And literally, when the coach is then considering them to start the next game or whatever it is, they can't hold on anymore and they like play badly or they have a bad mental reaction. And then that's actually when the coach is watching
Yep.
and they miss their next opportunity. And it happens so many times that players have the wrong reaction in the exact moment where they just needed to push through one more day, literally one
Yeah.
more day,
Just
one
see
more
it through.
week, whatever
Yeah.
it is. And I see it all the time. And the coach is like, well, I was going to play them this game, but I couldn't because they had a bad reaction. And I'm like, oh my God, you would have been back on track. But then they perpetuate the
Yep.
bad
And it
experience.
just
And
snow
I
and
did
it
as a
just
player.
snowballs.
I'm
Yeah.
disappointed I didn't start. My confidence is down. Then I have another bad practice. And then the coach was watching me that practice to see if I should start next game. And it's like players get in this cycle where they
Yeah.
perpetuate what they don't want to happen. And but as a player, like all you can see is your one part. You don't know that maybe the coach just made another decision. It didn't have
Yep.
to do with you or whatever it
Yep.
was. You take it so personally. So I try to tell players, although like I know they can't feel this at the time. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
not personal. Literally, you could be doing everything perfectly, and the coach just prefers another player. It's that
Yep.
simple. It doesn't mean anything about you.
Yep.
But
Well,
it's hard to believe that.
and it is, and confidence is so important with players, as you know that, and from a coaching standpoint, you know that. But you touched on it earlier, where you can't expect to get those long-term results immediately, right? Quote I use is, the day you plant the seed isn't the day you pick the fruit. It's you got to understand that it's a big process, and as you mentioned, players are very self-centered in it, which is as it should be, but the game and being a GM or being a manager, a coach, there's so many moving pieces that once again the player has no idea, is not even aware of. They're just focused on them. And it's, trying to establish, as you said, a trust between the player and the manager. So when I say, hey, I know you've started our last 12, let's sit you out this next one, whatever, give you a break. We want to look at somebody new. And you're like, okay, I understand that. And then you move on, right? Instead of being like, oh, he doesn't like me now. 12 games. I gave him 12 games. I didn't make any mistakes. Now you put in this person. Oh, she sucks. And then it's like you said, you just spiral, spiral, spiral. And it really could be just to get you some rest. That could
Yeah,
be
I
it.
I definitely think the spiral situation and then taking things so personally, I think is a thing too. Is like, and it's almost impossible to avoid. But like, I took things so
Yeah.
personally as a player, and quite often it wasn't about me. Like, it was
No.
so selfish of me to think that like it was all about me and all like someone was trying to give me a bad experience just because
Right.
they chose to play someone else. Like, it had nothing to do with me. So it's very interesting to now see this. But I even say to players sometimes, I'm like, I wouldn't have believed this as a player. So like, I don't even know if you're how you're going to receive this, but I have to say it to you. And
Yeah.
it's true. It's like as a player, even if someone had told me this, I could probably not have changed
Yeah,
how I feel.
whatever, dude. You're just shut up.
It just
You're
is. It
stop
just
trying to
is.
coddle me. Stop
Yeah.
trying to coddle me. But that's the thing, it's ego. And the best players have to have an ego, right? That's how you are able to elevate your game and you take things personally at times. But I think you've brought up a good point, and I'm gonna definitely make sure I sound clip this part on not taking it personal because it's not most of the time. Now, sometimes a coach could just really, it could be personal. That's fine. But a lot of the times it's not. And it's just what's better for the team, what's better for the game, what's better for the environment.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that there's a level of honesty, and you said it, the good word is trust. Like you
Hmm.
have to have the trust, and the coach and the GM or whoever has to earn your trust that they're going to be honest. And like if it is about you, actually say it. And if it's
Right.
not, you can trust. Like coaches would be like, "Oh yeah, I just picked another player," and I would always think, "No, it's because I am not fast enough, or I did not this." And like it, I would hope they need to tell me if that is why. And if
Right.
they don't say
Right.
it's why, that is not why. So like the trust that someone's going to be honest, which there's a lot of dishonesty in the sport, not even in a bad intention, just because people don't want to hurt someone's feelings or they don't, it's easier to say, oh, you didn't play because of your weaknesses rather than
Yeah.
you didn't play because I preferred someone else in the game.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
that's your job as a coach. You go on the field with the players you prefer for that
Yep.
moment for whatever reason. And it's okay to say that. And I think quite often we lie to players because it's hard to say that. Like I just had another
Right.
preference. It's kind of, it makes you seem bad, but it's true.
Yeah, and that's one of the tough parts of managing. That's one of the tough parts of being a GM. That's one of the tough parts of being in any position where you are in charge of hiring and firing and choosing who you want to, be with you or perform with you. And yeah, I mean it's not for everyone, but you also hope that, as we said, there's a level of trust there where you can say that and being able to make those decisions at hard times and look people in the eyes and say, hey, we're going to go with someone else. I think speaks a lot on your individual character as much as you may hurt their feelings. Hopefully there's that respect level with it.
Yeah, I
um
think that is so important. I don't think that many environments do a good job of that, honestly. That's like been one of my biggest commitments is to try to be really honest. And it's
yeah.
like it's pretty painful, honestly. It's
Yeah.
really hard to do. I'm not perfect at it, but I try really hard and it's uncomfortable. That's why
Sure.
people do it that much.
Yeah, so you've been doing this though now, like I said, we're two years complete. You started on as an interim basis. Kind of talk to us, how did that interim position come up? Was it something that you were looking at and kind of approached it, or was it other people like, hey, there's this person we might want, we know her, maybe you know her. How did that role come up, and how did it, or what was it that flipped from that interim to full time?
Yeah, so I'm from here, first of all. So I was back living here after playing. I actually didn't retire as a player. I had to step away because of health reasons. So I stopped playing. I was here. I had started my own business prior to stopping playing. So I was doing that. I had one baby. I was pregnant with another, and I was like, okay, this is my life. Like I'm living
Yeah.
back in my town. Like this is good for me.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I got this email connecting me with one of the new owners of the team here who I didn't know, and he was like, "Oh, can I come meet with you?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't really have time for this. You can come to my house." I
Yeah.
literally just moved into my house. I had no furniture. I invited this guy over. It was just like a funny situation. We joke about it now. And he came and he was like, "Yeah, our GM had to leave. We need an interim GM." And I kind of was like, "Oh God, like I don't think I could do this." Like think about
Yeah.
what my life was. I had like this kid. I literally was like visibly pregnant. I was like, I don't think this is for
Don't
me.
even have a couch
So
at your
yeah,
house. You're
exactly.
like,
I'm sitting like on the floor. So
yeah.
we joke about it now because I sent, so he left the meeting thinking like, okay, this went well. Hopefully Yael will do this. And I followed up and I sent him this list of people I recommended he contact for the role. Like I really thought about it too. I called people. I was like, would you do
Right.
this? Because I was like, this is not for me. I don't even know what a GM is. And so like of course, then he kept trying, and the list didn't really pan out. And I finally was like, okay, I'll do this on an interim basis just through the end of the season. I'm definitely not continuing. I don't think I'm going to be involved. And so then now I'm like, that was done with me. But, I started and basically I made about one decision and then I felt ownership over it. And I was like, oh, you make a player decision or a staff decision and it becomes yours now. Like you're
Mhm.
responsible for this. So I pretty soon into my interim title was kind of like in the back of my head, like, oh, I think I'm here.
I like it. I like it. Yeah.
So at the end of the time, I actually knew pretty early on that I'd probably continue, but it took me a little while to officially have them take off the interim title. And I was scared. I was really scared to embark on something that I had no idea. I still feel scared. Honestly, I still have no idea what I'm about to
Yeah.
get into, but very unfamiliar to me. I did not dream of being a GM. I didn't understand it very well. I'm still really learning what the role entails. And it also is a stepping into another career path that is really emotionally taxing and very involved in a way like it was as a player,
For
to
sure.
where it's scary for me. I am all in when I do something, and I didn't particularly feel up for it in my life to do that, and I don't know if really how I'm up for it, but I'm very passionate about it, and I realize it's probably what I'm meant to be doing, even though I
Yeah.
never thought of it or dreamed of it. But definitely have my mind has evolved on it a lot since that first conversation and since I first took the role.
Yeah, well, and I think it's so fascinating, and I've had this conversation with a few other guests and just with people in passing, but the the higher up you move in any field, the smaller that circle gets, right? And the less degrees of separation there are connecting all these people. And to know that they were looking for a GM, you did not have any experience in prior experience before, but people knew you and they came to you, and even when you tried, no, hey, get these people, they might be better, right? It's still knowing like, hey, that's the person we want, and I feel like with a lot of stuff you said, like, I don't know what I'm doing, I didn't know what I'm doing, I still kind of don't. That's what makes life's experiences so much fun, is like, at least for me, some people don't like the not knowing, but like not knowing what you're doing and then figuring it out, is like, hey, I can do this, right? It's like, and then you do the next thing and you're like, oh, okay, and then now you've done those last two things, and it gives you a little more experience for the next one, and then now every step you take, it's not so much blind, it's more like, hey, I know that my next foot goes in front of the other and in front of the other, and then now you're running. Maybe you're GM of the women's national team here soon, but it's cool to just see, by not knowing, just those, being a competitor, figuring it out and knowing like, hey, I can do this. I can do this. Maybe my first touch lets me down, but I'm going to make sure my second touch doesn't. And I think it's just something that's admirable to kind of hear you talk about. And now look at you. Like I say, you just won a championship, which is like going from the bottom to the top, So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. It's like people often ask, like, oh, well, how do I get to be a GM, or how do I get this job, or like, how do I get to coach at the professional level, like whatever it is. And it really, for specialty roles like that, where there's like a very small group of people, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it really is about who you are. It's not like I got hired for this role. I don't have a college degree. Like I didn't finish college. I left to play
Right.
professionally. I don't have a resume. Like I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed to say it, but I've never had time to stop and make a resume. I don't have anything on my resume. I was a
Yeah.
soccer player. Like, but I think it's like you build your resume of who you are as a person and the relationships you have, and that people trust you and they want to work with you. And what I do have is I can call up people who trust and respect me and tell them about the vision here, and they want to come work here.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to bring really great people to work alongside me and support me in the things I don't know, because I do have those relationships. And I think that's really true, is for a certain type of role, especially in professional sports, it's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the direct experience you have
Yep.
necessarily that can
Yep.
help. But there are people who get all the coaching licenses or have all the degrees, and if people don't know you and trust you and respect you, you're not going to get those jobs, because it is a huge leap of faith to put that responsibility in someone's hands. So they have to know you, not
Yeah.
your resume.
Not. Yep.
And that's why I have this job. It's because
Yeah.
people know and trust me as a person. It has
Right.
nothing to do with my previous experience, because I'm not prepared, and I've had to learn many, many things
On the
since I
go.
agreed to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's that to me is the beauty of networking. That is like, that is it right there. That's the beauty of it, is not being qualified maybe on paper. I'm not saying you weren't as an individual, but not having that paper qualification, that resume, but people know you, people respect you, and at the end of the day, you want someone who you know and respect to be leading you. The rest of the stuff can kind of sort itself out. Even if you picked up as a manager, how many, especially on the men's side, how many managers are there, but they're just there to do the press conferences and to do top level stuff. They hire one or two assistant coaches that know how to do the ins and outs, run training, do all this, so that way they can focus on their part. And you hire your weaknesses. That's what they say. The people that can do the things that you're not that good at, so they can do those, and you do what you're good at.
Yeah, and it's true. It's like nobody. like the general functions of a job, that's not inspiring to anybody. Like the assistant coach is like, just because you know the tactics and can lead a training session doesn't make you a good coach. You need
Right.
somebody who can do that stuff, but it's the leadership qualities and the way you make people feel about the work
Yep.
they're going to do. I think,
Yep.
and that's what to me makes a great coach. And now I've had to hire coaches, so I think of it really
Oh,
differently like that. Like everyone can present on the tactics and show me their game model. Like if you can't do that, you're not even in the
you
interview
don't, yeah,
process.
you're not even in it. How do you
So,
connect?
but it's like who is the person who people want to come work for and players want to play for? That's a whole nother question. And they don't have to, they're not putting out the cones and doing like leading that part of the session.
Right.
They're
Right.
inspiring the rest of the group. So it's really true. It's like you can fill in the pieces of all those details, but you can't be, if you don't have the relationship, the trust, the leadership component, then you got to be one of the other people.
Right. Right. Well, and we're getting ready to kind of get to the end of the podcast. It went by so fast. But one question that I've really enjoyed asking all of our guests this season is what's one part of your job that you feel people don't quite understand, or like they don't see how difficult this part is, or they don't understand that you even are a part or in charge of doing something like this. And maybe it's not one thing, maybe it's a few things, but give us something that the normal person does not know about the GM role.
Yeah, well, I think the GM role is probably different every club, but I can say one thing about this particular role because we're in a unique place as a club. Like we are trying to change our identity
Mm-hmm.
for forever, basically. Like we're not coming from a place of success where I'm just continuing in a model. We're trying to build an identity of success where really it hasn't been here as a club. So I think a big piece of what I do is go to bat behind the scenes to be able to bring the right people on board to present the budget and the strategy and get ownership buy-in to then move forward on it.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I think people and like, people think, oh, you make the roster, you like maybe hire the coaches and the staff, and then I'm kind of that's the piece. That's kind of
And
like the
that's,
tip of the iceberg.
yeah.
Below that are the strategic decks I've presented on like, here's how I want to do it. Here's what we should prioritize. Here's where we should invest and all that. And that piece is like none of the rest of it happens without that piece of like me feeling passionate about that and kind of pitching ownership on why we should do it a certain way. So I think quite often, people will be like, oh, like why didn't you focus on these details and this little stuff? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, because I have this big core philosophical piece I'm working on behalf of the club that is a huge responsibility I don't take lightly at all. But
Yeah.
it's the unseen part that like the part that people don't know that could have affected negatively are the parts I'm most proud of because there's
Right.
all these threats to what you're doing at all times. And so to protect the group from that and kind of fight the behind the scenes battles, so to speak, even when they're not battles, and it's just like a good
Just
conversation.
right.
Is the part that when people don't know it, it's good, but they also don't know it.
Right. Right. Well, and it's one of those things where I bring this up all the time. Everyone that's a fan loves to talk, crap about the striker that misses the 6 yard tap in, right? And it's like, oh my God, I could have scored that. My little kid could have scored that. And it's like, yeah, sure, maybe you could have, but could you have done the 99% of everything else that striker did to put himself in that position?
Yeah,
And a lot of times the answer is no, because you have no idea what goes into being able to get yourself in that position. And sure, yes, maybe they should have scored, maybe they shouldn't. That's, another conversation. But everything that goes into being even on the field,
yeah.
then being in a position to score, right? That's people always want to talk about the 2% of the stuff and not the 98% of the things that you're doing.
That's such a good analogy because it's true. It's like you could say all that, but you wouldn't have even been there. You wouldn't
We
have been
weren't
on the
even,
team. You wouldn't have
but
been in the conversation.
you
So
wouldn't.
it is
Nope.
true. It's like you have to earn the right to even be in that moment requires such a huge sacrifice that people don't talk about. They just view that
That
moment of
little,
piece.
that little bit.
That's a really great analogy, and it's true. It's like you feel that way as a player. It's like how could you have played that badly? Well, like yeah, but you got there. You should
Right,
be doing
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's such a good analogy. Yeah, it's really similar to that. Like when something doesn't go right on the surface, it's like, oh well, you were responsible and this thing went wrong. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you wouldn't have been at the game if we didn't.
And we didn't do all this other stuff that
Yeah,
you don't know about,
yeah,
but whatever, we can go on with that.
yeah.
Yeah, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, is there any like final final statement, final bit of advice, final plug, shout out, mic drop, anything that you want to do before we wrap up here?
No, I just think a big thing for me is like honesty. And I know we kind of touched on it, but I think like whatever, whoever's listening, whether it's player, coach, somebody aspiring to be in the front office, it's like committing to being honest with yourself and with
Mm-hmm.
the people around you. Like I think a lot of people say they want to be something, but they're not even honest with themselves and if they're willing to put in the work or if they know what it takes. So honesty has become a big thing to me. In terms of like being honest with myself on how I'm doing or if I'm doing things right or if I could have done better, and then being honest with the people around me. And it's
Yeah.
really hard to do. It makes you very vulnerable. But I think in a career path, the more honest you can be with starting with yourself, but everyone else around you in terms of saying what you want. I have the
Mm-hmm.
dream to be this, even if people are like, whoa, really? That's crazy.
Yeah,
The
right.
honesty of doing things really compounds and has a positive result, in my opinion, if you're willing to commit to it. So I encourage everyone to just think a little bit about honesty in their life and like how it plays a role, because I think it's really huge.
I love it. I love it. Like you said, be honest with yourself, the most important thing. I would tell my high school kids, everybody says they want to win a state championship, but nobody wants to put in the work it takes to win a state championship. It sounds great to say, "Oh man, that would be so cool. I want to play pro." But then yet every day you're home after school on the couch playing video games, drinking Mountain Dew, and it's like, well, what you say and what you want are not lining up with each other. So
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Yael, I want to thank you for being a guest. One, I thought we had some really good conversations, and I thought you dropped some really important gems on what it takes to just be at a high level, perform at a high level, whether it's as a player, whether it's as a professional, whether it's in the office, on the field. It's competition is competition, and I think once you have that in you, you don't lose it. So it's just how do you change it to match what you're doing, and it's like so far it looks like it's working out well for you. I'm gonna definitely keep an eye out on Gotham FC, and hopefully next year you guys can kind of repeat. I know it's more difficult to win two in a row, but like you said, you don't go into a season thinking you're going to do bad. You go in there thinking you're going to do the best you can.
Yeah, no, greatly appreciate it. I've really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you.
Yes, no problem. So, everyone, we want to thank you for listening to the No Stress Midwest podcast. This was an episode, season 6, the business and front office side of things. We had Yael Averbuch here, who was on, general manager for Gotham FC of the NWSL 2023 champions. I want to make sure I don't leave that out anymore. But yes, thank you all for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Cheers.